that we try to sort of do a quick rehash of the chapters that we have already done before we move on to the seventh chapter. Uh, and therefore, we are sort of trying to look at chapter 2, and so that you can benefit from it. The first chapter is the Vishada Yoga, and Bhagavad Gita starts with they are reaching there, and they're, this whole context is set. Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samveta Yusavah Mamakaha Pandava Seva Kimakurvata Sanjaya starts with this. Now, there's a question is raised by Dhritarashtra and Sanjaya, who is watching everything through his Dibya Sakshu, is going to give him Akho Dekha Hal in a kind of living commentary on whatever is happening. And Bhagavan is his dialogue with Arjuna will be captured in the course of this, which is the heart of Bhagavad Gita. And in chapter 1, there is nothing significant except that there is a description of both the armies and how they begin the war. And there are some symbolic interpretations, how both of them are trying to blow their conches and how the armies are arranged. And then Sanjay mentions how Arjuna suddenly, looking at both these armies on both the sides, develops some kind of an emotional trauma within. And he says that, I don't want to fight. But he speaks about it in a very detailed way. And one might have some questions in his mind as what is the necessity, if at all, what is the need for our friend Arjuna to go into such details to describe how he is traumatized and afraid. And these are again are mentioned to refer to different innovations and different resistances that common people can have to the call of duty. And what happens to a consciousness which is limited by ignorance, which is restricted by an inability to see the reality of things, which all of us are naturally. So Bhagavad Gita kind of sets the tone for this, saying that Siddhanti mama gatrani mukham cha parishusyanti. How she is very scared of this. Nimittani cha pashyami viparitani keshava. He looks at all the lingers, the hints of wrong things happening to him. And therefore, he says, I don't want to fight because I don't want to kill my relatives and friends and my acharyas, pitaras, putras. Why should I kill all them? For what? Forget about earth. Even for Swarga Prapti, I'm not going to kill them. Why? Because I'm going to have a lot of papas. Why? Because he's going to kill them, he's going to terminate them. He's going to put an end to their existence. War is always violent. And he says, I don't want to be a cause of this violence, which is going to lead to a lot of bloodshed. I'll have a lot of papa. And then he's talking about the evils of war. And you can say that, in fact, Arjuna is playing the peacenik here. He's the peace activist who's arguing with Bhagavan that no, we don't want to fight because war will make women helpless, which is true. Because if you look at the history of wars, all the wars were fought by men, and who suffered? The women. They lost their sons, their brothers, their husbands. And they were ravaged. They will be attacked by enemy armies. They'll lose their dignity. They'll be violated, oppressed, and then raise a lot of orphan children. So Varna Sankaras are mentioning, but one clear hint could also be that whenever there has been a war in those primitive days, threat to women was kind of a cause of fear for the enemy. So it was used, sexual violence was used as an instrument of war. And that comes out very clearly. And then he's saying that the bloodline will also be affected because women will, whether they will establish relationships by choice or by force, external, they'll be forced to Sri Sudustas Vasniya Jayate Varna Sankara Sankuro Narakayeva Kula Gnanam Kulasya It Padanti Vidrapi Samlupta Tindudaka Kriyaha. Then he mentioned about how the Pitris, because ancestor worship was a powerful theme in many ancient civilizations in most parts of Asia. Uh, I've seen that the kind of Mahalaya Sadha we do in India, they also have that in Cambodia. And one particular fine morning when we were driving to the airport there in Phnom Penh, there was a huge traffic jam, and I was asking, "What is wrong today?" And they said that today everyone is going home because tomorrow we have these family get-togethers to remember the forefathers. And I figured out what was it. It was Mahalaya. Interestingly, the same exact date. I don't know how they sort of calculated, but they also have ancestor worship. And parts of China, they have ancestor worship. So here he's talking about it. And therefore, he's saying that it's very important that we need to protect the bloodlines, the families, the virtues of the woman. And Arjuna puts down his bow and arrow and refuses to fight. This is how the first chapter comes to an end. And the second chapter, which is the beginning of the dialogue between Bhagavan, the teacher, and Arjuna, the student. So he mentions that how Arjuna kind of puts down his bow and arrow, he refuses to fight. So what does Bhagavan do? He sort of tries to chide him, like a coach who suddenly a batsman, if he's in the order, he's supposed to be first down, he suddenly refuses, to go. And the captain comes and says, okay, next is your turn. Maybe it's a very bouncy pitch and this batsman is scared. He's saying, no, I don't want to go. I'll go at number 4 or 5. He doesn't want to face these fast bowlers on the bouncy pitches. What does the coach do? He comes and chides them. Are you forgetting one of the best batsmen? Do you know what this X and Y told about you? You have the best technique in the world, and today is the day for you to prove a point to everyone. What are you scared of? Similarly, Bhagavan is kind of asking that what makes you fear so much today? And Arjuna is now giving not a description of his fear. First, he gave a description of his physical state and his mental state. That my body is trembling, I feel like fainting, I am sweating, I cannot fight, these are my fears. But in the second chapter, in the beginning, he sort of gives a few philosophical arguments against war as such. And these are powerful arguments. So he says, Katham Bhisma Aham Sankhye Doram cha Madhusudana Ishubhi Pratijosyami Pujaha Varisudana. These guys are worthy of worship, and you are asking me to attack them. Why should I at all attack them? And then he mentions what are the papas that are going to follow. Guru ni hatva hi mahanuvavan Sriyo bhoktum bhaikyam apiha loke Atvartha kamansu gurun niheva Bhunjiya bhogan vidhira pradipdhan. He goes on that I don't want to live. I don't want to live a long life by killing these people. And so I'm completely, then he surrenders to the Lord. He says, okay, I'm Karvanya doso pahata svabhavaha prichami twang dharma samudha chetaha jasreha syat nishchitam bruhitaname sisyaste aham sadhi mam tvam prapannam. I'm surrendering to you, Lord. You're my Lord. And he's accepting his Siswatva in the old Vedic tradition. When the disciple goes to an Acharya and tells that now I want to learn the secrets about Atma, please tell me, I surrender to you. So, similarly, here Arjuna is seeking answers from Bhagavan as complete surrender. He is perturbed, he has a few philosophical arguments, and he's going to have further arguments. And therefore, the Bhagavan Shankaracharya starts commentary on Bhagavad Gita on sloka 10th onwards. He says that, okay, these are the ways Papa Punya and everything happens, and gives a long lecture regarding why we suffer, what is the source of ignorance, what is the necessity, and all that is kind of described in the first chapter and the slokas up till now. And it talks about where is the Tatvika part starts. And this chapter is beautifully organized and sort of grows from one level of discussion regarding What is knowledge? What is Atma? What is body? What is mind? What is the self? And what is karma? How do you deal with it? And then there are a lot of distinctions about how you graduate to a higher level, and how you reach that level of equanimity that you can actually take pain and pleasures of life without any perturbation. And this second chapter is very relevant now that we are facing corona. This is all around. And Bhagavan gives him some hints regarding ways in which he has to deal with this challenge of this sudden emergent fear and anxiety in him regarding his duty, which is a war. I mean, if you're a soldier, you have a job, you have to fight. So Bhagavan is going to put that in a certain context. There is a lot of academic debate going on in the West, saying that Bhagavan is kind of justifying violence and war. And Arjuna, he could have negotiated, he could have put an end to it. But the context in which one has to understand is that Bhagavad Gita is very metaphoric. The war is a war within ourselves, between different forces which are active in us. And Bhagavad Gita is not about a physical war, even though the setting is like that. It's always about an unending conflict which is going on in all of us between the aspiration to go to a higher level of consciousness and the pulls and distractions which they try to restrict our progress, hold us back, remind us of our deficiencies and weaknesses which we have inherited through our past karmas and past habits, and disable us from looking further, rising higher. And what are the ways in which we can do this? By breaking the shackles of ignorance and old habits with a new understanding and steadfast perseverance, and through practice. The practice not only informed by an understanding of who we are, but practice which is not just about hatha yoga like breathing exercises or physical exercises. This is supplemented, backed up by a philosophical understanding about the meaning of our very being, about who we are, what it means to be here, what it means to die, what it means to be alive, and why we are alive, what is the purpose of life, and what is moksha, what is liberation, what is niratisaya ananda, happiness beyond comparison. All these things Bhagavan discusses. So second chapter is kind of the mother, the platform on which the whole dialogue sort of unfolds between the student and the teacher. So he sort of Bhagavan kind of mockingly tells Arjuna. And if you look at sloka 11, from there on till sloka 25 almost, this will be a discussion broadly about our Atma. Okay, this is very important for you to sort of take that into account. That here he's talking about the self, and he'll be dealing with this in beautiful way and in different things. So uh, 1 to 2 is kind of surrender of Arjuna to Bhagavan, and the Sankhya Yoga is from sloka number 11 till 38. But I will further sort of, I see that as kind of in parts. So from 11, what Bhagavan says that you're not a very wise guy, at least you don't impress me as somebody who appears to know, but he doesn't know. You have a pretense of knowledge. You're quoting Shastra saying that you're going to have Papa and this and that, but surface knowledge is not going to be helpful. Let's go deeper. So he's saying that you talk like a very wise guy, but you have a lot of faulty understanding because you are bothering about what is transitory. Gatasu nagatasumscha nanu sochanti panditaha. But whatever is transitory, ephemeral, it's going to be here for a while and you're obsessed with it. There is where Bhagavan is kind of telling us that there is a difference between two levels of reality. One is phenomenal, the other one is more real. Okay? Like during dreams, we see a lot of things. When we wake up, they don't trouble us anymore. We are free from the dream. Similarly, a lot of things which appear and then vanish need not necessarily all the time trouble us. And then he sort of gives certain hints regarding the immortality of the soul. This is very important to remember now that we are stuck with corona and fear of death. He says, Natvivaham jatu nasam, natvam nemi janadipaha, na chiva na bhavisyamaha, sarve vayamataha param. There was never a time that you were not there or I wasn't there, or I shall not be there or you will not be there. What is he talking about? He's not talking about the physical body of Arjuna. Here is the secret message of Vedanta coming forth, that if you see yourself as a body, there's a problem. But look at the consciousness. In that consciousness, that I am, which is Param Brahman, and you just a reflection of it or an iota of it, in whichever way you want to make sense of it. So far, I'm there, you're there. You may not be there, but I'm there. You don't remember. Why? Because you don't understand what is happening. And therefore, you're forgetting. You think you're being born, you're dying. That is at the phenomenal, at the level of appearances. Okay? Then, then he talks about the changeability of ourself. The aspect of us which changes is not the self. What changes? The apparent aspect, the physical aspect, the emotional aspect. What changes is the way we look. We look very attractive for a while when we are very young, and then the hair begins to grow, the wrinkles appear, the skin becomes loose, muscles vanish, all these things happen. Then we have illnesses, isn't it? So he's comparing this, the way we change our clothes, this cell changes bodies. Okay? देहिनोऽस्मिन् यथा देहे कौमारं यौवनं जरा तथा देहान्तरप्राप्तिः धीरस्तत्र न मुह्यति. He doesn't have any attachment. He doesn't get confounded by the fact that the self is dropping one physical form to assume another. He mentions that. And then he mentions how what we are experiencing a change are products of our connectivity with the external reality. And we call that good and bad and that. Agama payino anityas tangstitikyasva bharata, tolerate them. Somebody might get angry with you, somebody might praise you, somebody might misbehave with you. Very, very temporary. They are sort of interacting with the mental aspect of you, the emotional aspect of you. So what is the substratum? That is pure consciousness. And that substratum of yours is no different from the substratum of this whole universe, the pure consciousness, Satchidananda Swarupa. And then he goes on and he mentions that a person who knows this, he starts talking about the wise guy, the Dhira, and how he doesn't get affected, and Amrutatvaya Kalapate Nasutu Vidyate Bhavo Na Bhava Vidyate Sada Uryorapi Dushtam Tas Tanayos Tattvadarsihi. This is a very, very important, because some people say this is the summary of whole of Bhagavad Gita. What is Nitya and what is Anitya? That Nitya Vastu Viveka, Viveka Vairagya. When we mention about sadhana chakra, what is that Nitya Nitya Viveka? That is what is dealt with here. What is there through Anvaya and Vyatireka? So, to give you an example to start with, you have gold and you have a necklace, you can melt it and you can have a bracelet. The necklace will vanish and then the bracelet will come, but the gold will be there. Similarly, he's saying there is a box, there is a mat, there is a book, there is a computer. What is common to all that is the easiness. You got to understand that easiness is there with everything, whereas the forms that it takes, the qualities it assumes, keep changing. What doesn't change? That ease. And that can describe everything. And there's a long explanation of it. by Shankaracharya, saying how that itself refers to the secret of understanding what is the Brahma Tattva, the substratum, that which always is. And why is he talking about it? Because he has to remove fear and anxiety from the mind of Arjuna, which is all of us. When we are struck with fear of death, and disease, and corona, and a lot of people are dying. But if you deeper, go deeper. Emotional pain and frustration is very, very true. But if you go deeper, the fundamental truth here is actually it doesn't make much of a difference. The body will go and body will come back. Whatever sadhana we have done will come back and start our sadhana from there. In Yoga Vrasta thing we have just finished in the 6th chapter. And then he talks about the nityatva and the immortality of the soul, the Atma, which is there in all of us. Avinasi tutadavidhi yena sarvam idam tatam. From where everything has manifested is vyapta tatam. From what? That's Satya, Satchidananda Swarupa. And then he says that you have to understand that. And you and antavanta ime deha nitya sukta saririnaha. And what he says is anasino pramyasya tasmad yudhyasva bharata. There is a link sentence everywhere saying therefore you fight, therefore you do your duty kind of thing. But what he's saying is many times we are unable to do what is appropriate or what is required of us to do because of faulty fear. We might suffer or wrong anxiety which might overpower us because we are taking our eyes off the fundamental reality of who we are. The Vedanta gives a lot of confidence even during a pandemic because whatever might happen, if you believe in the Atman and you strongly believe that you are no different, Brahma Satya Jagana Mithya Jiva Brahmaiva Na Paraha, no different. Once we have the ability, the richness of understanding, the details that we require to establish ourselves in that fundamental truth, that actually there's no difference, then it's much easier even to accept the falling of this body. We are not permanent. We may not die in corona, we might survive. That will be a few more years. The body is going to fall. So there has to have some kind of a fundamental ability in all of us to first understand what is death, and then also to accept that this is a necessary aspect of our physical presence here. There's nothing to be scared of, and that's very important. It's very, very important. And I personally think one of the reasons why we do this Sraddham in the Parampara is in fact to remind ourselves that we're going to die. When we do the Sraddham for the Father, we remember Father with a lot of love and affection, and we give him whatever food, water, whatever you do, the prayer. What are you actually dealing with? You're dealing with mentally preparing yourself that, look here, this body you have is going to fall. It's transitory. People have left, and you're also going to leave someday. And this is an important aspect, being happy in life. Because when you know this is only for so much time, it's much easier to have this so much time you have spent meaningfully than if you think it's permanent. And therefore, you have illusory dependence on a future where you'll fulfill all your dreams, experience everything you haven't till now, and you are relying on uncertainty. And thus, sort of reducing your capacity to deal with what is certain, what is true, which is unavoidable, which is the fact about our having to leave this place on a fine morning or night. That's inevitable. We cannot change that. We've got to be very normal. We have to have that stoic acceptance, but we as well accept it smiling. What is wrong? If we go, we go. We cannot stay here permanently. Even if corona, no corona, pandemic, no pandemic, we have to. Invariably, all the people who have left would have left at a certain point of time, and we'd all leave. And this is what it's very difficult to accept it emotionally. But that's the fundamental truth to accept. I remember long back, I was reading an essay by Broughton Russell. He makes a very good point that you have to tell the child sometime that if you're the father, you are the mother, you have to tell the child sometime that you're going to die. And the child need to understand that there's something called death. If the child doesn't know that, and suddenly the child in the middle of his life, and he loses his father or mother or somebody he loves, he might get permanently damaged. Might get emotionally really disturbed. It's part of parental education. And that's how it happens, that when the father is doing Sraddha Karma, he brings his young son to sit with him, and his young son says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Okay, we are giving some food and water, anything, to the soul of your grandfather, who is my father." Or if the father and grandfather both are alive, the grandfather does that, and the grandchild watches it. He learns from it. This place is not permanent. And therefore, it's just a delusion. No, it's not a delusion either. So, what is the truth? The truth is that there is an aspect of who we are which is immortal. That is the only true aspect. That is why he mentions that Nasaka Vidyate Bhava, Nabhava Vidyate Sataha. And then, whosoever thinks that this one, there is a killer, there is a killed, doesn't mean he's encouraging you to go and kill somebody or he's justifying violence. What he's saying is that you are confusing the self with a physical frame. You're confusing the sky. Let's imagine with this small object, and you're saying that this particular thing, the circular object, which has some space in it, if I break it to pieces, the space inside this particular object is going to destroy. No, its space is there. You destroy space, will continue to be there. If you look at this pen, the space which is there, the pen space, is the pen space getting destroyed when you break the pen into pieces? No, there's nothing called pen space. It's just a name. Okay, so that is how he mentions, and then he mentions na jayate mriyate va kadachit nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuyah ajo nitya sasvato ayam purano na hanyate hanyamani sarire. It doesn't get killed, it cannot be hurt. But what gets hurt? The physical body. What becomes dysfunctional? The mind. What becomes old and diseased? The body. What is beyond this? The self, the Atma. Is it like a ghost in the machine, like they mention in the West in certain religious traditions? We don't accept it. For us, it's not, the soul is not an individual object. It is imagined as an object. As much as you will think this particular object is there, the space inside, you can say the nail cutter space. You can talk like that. But there's nothing called nail cutter space. It's just space. You're adding a name to make sense of whatever you're seeing, to make it convenient for you to relate to that object. But that object, the truth of that object is not responsible for your twisted understanding of it. Okay? And then, so he's saying, so no Veda Vinasinam Nityam Enam Ajam Avyayam. This is without a birth and without any vyaya, without death. Katham sa purusha partakam khatayati hantikam. Who is killing, who is being killed, not justification of violence. Don't take it there, which some people try to do. The purpose is to focus on the immortality aspect of our consciousness. Doesn't mean it's a justification for hurting and killing somebody, because the Veda is very clear. It says, "Ahinsat sarva bhutani." If you do it, that is papa. Only certain ritual sacrifices, Vedic sacrifices, they kind of accept them. But there are philosophers who think even there you have some papa because you are doing violence. Violence is absolutely not acceptable in any corner in this whole dialogue. Then he mentions why the death happens, because when the clothes are old, we abandon them, we wear new clothes. Don't you think the self has a right also to change clothes, have a new body, a fresh body? Of course it can. So he mentions Vasangsi Jinnani Yatha Vihaya Navani Grandhani Naroparani Tatha Sarirani Vihaya Jinnan Nyanyani Sanyati Navani Dehi Nainam Chinnanti Sastrani Nainam Dahati Pavakaha Nainam Kledayam Tyapo Nasu Sayati Marutaha. Is kind of mentioning the invulnerability of the self. to external limitations and restrictions that we see is affecting us. Who is that us? The body, the mind. The body feels hurt, the mind feels hurt. But the body mind complex is temporary. The self is not. And then there is further in the 25th sloka, he mentions what is then the self? He mentions affirmative sentence, abhyakta achintya. It's very not easy to imagine what it is. Avikaryoyam, and it's avikari uchyate. Tasmad eva viditva enam nanu shochitum arhasi. So don't worry that you're going to kill, you're fighting a war, people are going to die, there's a disease, there's death. Don't get perturbed, accept it. But don't accept and become a fatalistic person. Use this understanding regarding who you are, what's yourself, to ascend to a higher echelon of consciousness where you have greater understanding of who you are and you are able to live your life much more meaningfully with a greater purpose. You might say, how is it possible? You are saying everything is a joke, and you're saying that then I can live my life meaningfully. Then he'll say how. So he now mentions a little about reconciliation with death, even if by mistake we accept that even the self is anitya, even then you should not at all think. Why? Whosoever is born here has to die. Whatever is, remember, whatever is a product has a beginning, whatever has a beginning has an end. That is as simple as that. Anything you think about, anything, is a painting or poem or song or whatever. You might record someone's voice, like I'm speaking, it's on the YouTube, so my body will fall tomorrow. Then what happens? You can still watch me in the YouTube, right? Does that make me nitya? No. The body and the form through which this is coming out is going to go. And that's for sure. However, we keep listening to great singers who are not around. We relate to their voice. That doesn't make them nitya. That's an illusion of permanence that we create. Like somebody dies, there's a huge storm over there, or tomb, or there are books of great authors we read, we relate to their mind through their writings. These are illusions of permanence. They have to go. That's as simple as that. And therefore, he says, there's a beautiful sentence. In order to help us reconcile to the transitoriness of our life, we are here for a while. We got to understand that. Abhyaktadini bhutani vyaktamadhyani bharata abhyakta nidhananyeva tatra ka paridevana. What is there to worry about? And it's very beautiful. What is the beginning of whatever we see is coming out of abhyakta, that maya or prabhana, whatever Sankhya says. Where is it going to go? In Pralaya, we'll get back to there. That particular bija rupa, karana sarira, where everything gets dissolved. And then what we do? Now we are seeing what is vyakta madhyani, whatever appears in between. That is vyakta. It appears for a while and goes. Think about a dream. Imagine if it's possible that you continue to have a beautiful dream every night. You'll crave for that beautiful dream, isn't it? I'm going to see that beautiful garden, and there'll be other children, and you are a child, and you're going to have a game. You're going to fight and play and eat a lot of foods and pluck flowers and run after dragonflies. Just fantasize. And there's a lovely spring. We'll go on a boating. You might get drowned, but no one will die. Just imagine. Beautiful, heavenly place. Then the sleep breaks early morning. Then your mother will shout at you and say, go, ready, get ready, go to school. It's over. And you want to sleep a little more, but that's not possible. It's over. Similarly, whatever we are experiencing right now is very temporary. We cannot hold on to it. It's like a dream. It's going to be over. And that's for sure. And we have to just have the equanimity to recognize that truth. And this Atma Tattva he's talking about, even though it is very easy to accept, okay, we'll not feel bad, but to reject everything as delusional, he also mentions there is some truth aspect of it. So how do I describe, how do I understand it? He mentions Arsaryavat pasyati tasya venam, Arsaryavat vadati tatheva chanyah Arsaryavat च च एनम अन्यः शृणोति श्रुत्वापि एनम वेद न चैव कश्चित्. So beautiful, most powerful sentence. How difficult it is to know the self. And even some people see that as a magical thing, somebody speak about it, somebody hear it. Even then, nobody gets a complete understanding of it. And we had a very long commentary on this by Madhusudan. If you can revisit that. And then he mentions a little about uh, this whole karma and how we have to do it here. So he's saying, Dehi nityam bodhyoyam dehe sarvasya bharata tasma sarvani bhutani natvam sochitu maharasi. And there suddenly he makes a twist. First he talks about Atma Tattva, and therefore he removes fear from the heart of Arjuna. Then he brings Arjuna, the student, back to the context of life, saying, there is something called karma. Even though the phenomenal reality is a joke, it cannot be rejected as false. It is not tuchya, like a horns of a rabbit. No, it's not tuchya like that. It's not a completely delusional thing. The snake appears in a rope because there is something called a rope, and you are misidentifying that thin, long body of the rope as body of the snake. And maybe it's a little twisted, so it looks like a snake. But if the rope isn't there, you will not talk about the snake. There is something. So we are talking about samsara. There is something. We're talking about individual. What is that something? That something is without name and form, the Brahma Swarupa, Satchidananda Swarupa, which is Sarva Vyapaka. And therefore, he sort of mentions it here. He brings you to the context of your life, which is phenomenal. Then he's saying, okay, even if you forget about all these truths and all, you have to do your swadharma to have a fight. And what is swadharma? You know, swadharma, one is, you do dharma, whatever is shruti, and it is your smriti, and whether one should fight a war. What is the justification? Then it brings in the social and the cultural sanctions for different kinds of activities that are carried out, and where you find yourself in a corner in the division of labor. You may be a professor, you may be an engineer, and you may be in a factory producing medicine. And depending on whatever you do, you have to carry out those activities. And therefore, he talks about Pradharma, and he's a Kshatriya, and there is a very specific dialogue which has an overload of sociological aspects that you have to fight. If you run around or run away, then people are going to make fun of you. So, how to do this Pradharma? So, Buddhi Yukta, Jahatiya Uve Sukrita Diskriti. So, whether Papa and Punya, forget about it. And he's now introducing what is Karma Yoga, Niskama Karma Yoga. The mentions Tasmat yogaya, you just work. So you fight. Why? In order to practice yoga. Yoga karmasu kaushalam. It's a very beautiful word. Karmasu kaushalam. What is that kaushala? Is saying that phalatyaga, staying away from karma sangha, any desire, any craving for results. That is the secret of turning karma into karma yoga. That is karmasu kaushalam. That we'll continue to do everything we do without craving. Why? Because we have learned we are not this body and mind complex. And then we are doing for whom? We're going to do for Swadharma. We're going to do it for the social context in we are born. We have children, we have brothers, their families, the country, whatever. You pay attention to all that. But don't confuse yourself as trapped you are in all this as somebody who is a prisoner of the circumstances. These kind of feelings we have. A lot of people write a lot of poems. You are overwhelmed by emotional context in which you have to carry out your very hard tasks. And therefore, he mentions all that. And he also mentions what are the benefits. So there are two things here. The understanding of the Atma, having some Atma Jnana, studying a bit of Vedanta, this Gita, and learning that you are not the body, then doing the work, accepting the social context in which you have to do your duties, and at the same time, not accepting your social being as the ultimate truth about your reality. Mark my words. Your social being has to be active, relate to the external world, do things. But you shall not limit your understanding of who you are to the social self, the social duties that you have. You may be a man or a woman, irrespective of whatever nationality. You should not limit your self understanding to how you describe yourself or the society describes yourself. There is tremendous potential for experiencing a new freedom in this Vedantic approach. And what is that? Because it says, even though people might say that you are dark or handsome or not so handsome, you have long hair, short hair, old, young, these things need not limit your ability to release your freedom with the understanding that you are the self non different from the universal truth of existence, the Satchidananda Swarupa. What a fantastic, blissful self understanding. That need not be limited, restricted, hammered into a limited shape, twisted by self imposed name and form, which society might hand over to you, saying you belong to X or Y or Z caste or nationality or gender or economic group, whatever that be. That shouldn't limit your ability to see yourself as without limitations. And your journey can continue on a path where you are not bound by these conditionalities and you are not a prisoner of your circumstances. Externally, yes, but internally you can still be free. That's what he's hinting here. And then he says, Karmajam buddhi utta he phalam tektva manishinaha janmavanda vinirmutta padam gacchantyanayam anamayam without any, there's no maya, there's no mala, there's no stain. They go and they get that. How? When they understand that they have to get rid of the result, that craving for result. That is what binds you to your karma. Now the science of karma starts here. Okay? And then he says in the verse number 42nd and 43rd, if you can't disconnect, what are the benefits? Yada te moha kalilam buddhir vyati buddhir vyatita vyati buddhir vyatita rishyati tada gantasi nirvedam srotavyasya shutasya cha. So it's a very clear hint. He's saying, and we have discussed that at length, how by living this sort of a life with the new understanding of who you are, number one, as immortal, caught up in a physical world, caught up in certain social roles and responsibilities, having that beautiful understanding of the self and removing yourself because your agency is not limited. In fact, you have no agency. The agency is self imposed for a limited purpose of purifying your consciousness by doing your work without craving for results. It's a technological thing, it's a probation period. You have to undergo the probation to be established in the self, and therefore you are doing the karma. Probation period is over, you'll become a jnana yogi. Then you can abandon your social roles and responsibilities, turn to books, sit and meditate longer without any restrictions. And when Bhagavan mentions this, Arjuna is very shy. This is really, so what am I going to look like? How am I going to feel if I succeed in this process? Then he asks Bhagavan, Sita Pragyasya ka bhasa samadhistasya kesara Sitadhi kim pravhaseta kimasita vrajeta kim. Three things is asked. How does he meditate? And then that kimasita, kim pravhaseta, how does he interconnect with others? Is he going to be completely asocial or he's going to still have interactions with others? He has to. If you're one, you are amongst many, you have to interact. So he's talking about the samadhi avastha when he's going to be in a meditative state. What are the aspects? What are the siddhis? Where he's going to reach? Then how does he interact with others? And then Vrajetakim. During Bhuthana Dasa, when he has to do a lot of activity, you have to go to office, you have to achieve this. How do you do everything, and how you return to your meditation? Because that self-understanding, how to make a return to it. So you have the external engagement and the internal concentration. How do you combine both? How do you live an integrated yogic life? You cannot sit all the time to meditate. Who's going to give you bread and butter? And who's going to fend for your family? You have to do that. You have to do your social responsibilities and duties. So Bhagavan answers that in a beautiful way, and there's a long dialogue there. He first starts how to sit and meditation. He starts with some description of the broad attitude required in yoga. And he mentions Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atmanevatmana tustasthita prajna pradichyate. That is the fundamental lakshana. You use your mind to control your mind, and that sort of keeps repeating in whole of Bhagavad Gita. How can you use your mind to defeat your mind? Which mind are you using? Which mind are you controlling? The Viveka Yukta mind is your best friend. It will come later on, isn't it? So it's like you use your understanding that you have after listening to Bhagavad Gita to control the mind which is running around, which is vulnerable to a lot of distractions. Okay, and then you sort of ascend. So one level of understanding enables you to go to a higher level of understanding. That enables you to go to another higher level of understanding, and that's how you gradually make use of your accomplishments at one level to establish yourself and your concentration and your self-understanding at another level. And it's like a mountaineer. If you have watched them, they slowly move their feet with the rope and the hammer and the nails and everything, and slowly they go up. Similarly, we have to go. Okay. And then there is a beautiful sentence where he says, what kind of an attitude you need? Dukhesu anadvignamanaha sukhesu begadastuha. Beautiful. Whatever happiness you have, be quiet. Whatever sadness you have, don't become udvigna. Don't be anxious. When you are too happy, don't be super proud about it. Vita raga bhaya krodha, and try to overcome. Go beyond this attachment and dvesas and fears, hatred, fear, aversion. Attachment, aversion, and fear. They're the three most important emotions all of us experience. And you can virtually put in all emotions into these three categories: raga, dvesha, and bhaya. You put them. He's saying beyond that, how Sita Dhil Muni Ruchyate. That guy is Sita Prajnarjuna. Do you think you can reach there and release in the self? Think about it. It's not about running away from the fight, it's about getting into the gear. You should learn. It's not about living life, it's about living life. It's not about leaving, it's about living your life in a meaningful way. And then he's saying, then there's a lot of discussion that how Subha and Ashubha, okay, Navi Nandati na dveshti, neither he praises nor he makes any dvesha and aversion, tasya prajna pratisthita, and it continues. Then there is a mention about once you have this right attitude, how will you practice concentration? Because your senses are pulled from all sides. Then gives the beautiful example for turtle. The turtle, immediately withdraws his legs and his limbs when it finds itself in a hostile environment. Same way, the yogi quickly withdraws his senses from the external world when he is met with the assault of tempting objects of desire. He immediately withdraws his senses. He cannot close his eyes or anything, okay? That's not the technique here. You're in a mall, your mind is jumping around. You say, oh my God, beautiful grocery shop. Let me look at few clothes. I want to buy for myself. I want to buy for my nephew, niece, whatever. The mind jumps around. Then there is electronic shop. Or maybe I want to buy something. The mind is like the mind of a child. No, not much different these days. Old or young, behave, all are shopaholics. But the yogi kind of withdraws the mind. Really, what do you want? Why did you come here? What do you want to pick up? He just goes, whatever he requires, he just buys that and leaves that place. And then he mentions that how you sometimes have to control what you take This mind is not independent. It has a intricate relationship with the physical frame in which you live. And what is that? Your body. So Vishya vinivartanti niraharasya dina rasavarjanam sutyasya param drishta nivartate. Another very powerful sentence. That you can deny yourself a lot of things. Your physical senses, you can deny them access to the external reality, but it might stop your connectivity with external objects of pleasure and pain. But the vasanas, the desires, the craving, the seeds will be there in you. And when are they going to go? Param Drishtva, when you know what is the Atma. So again and again, is a beautiful integral perspective where Tattva Darshana, knowing the self, and the yogic sadhanas, and the processes, and how you interact with everyone else during your lifespan, these are all intricately, inherently interdependent, and you have to make a good understanding of that interdependence work for you for spiritual success. That is the message here. And then he says that, so you through your senses, tani sarvani sanyamya yukta asita matparaha, you try to sort of, and so, indriyani pramatini haranti prasavamana, these are like assassins, these senses. They'll come and assert you, they'll pull you all around. And therefore, you have to control them, but you might feel, but I don't have enough energy. And Bhagavan says, are you different from me? Didn't I tell you that you are not different from me? We're just one consciousness. So whenever you feel scared, be matpara, think about me. Think about Lord Krishna. Think about Durga, Devi, Lord Shiva. Corona, getting scared, don't forget you are not different from me. Focus on me, meditate on me, drive away your fears. Your fears are fears associated with your understanding of yourself as the body. The moment you are associated with me, you're associated with the Lord of the universe, and this whole universe is a manifestation of that energy, that consciousness. You shall not have as much fear as you have now. It takes a little time, but that is what the Shastra says. And then when you are able to control these senses, then you are able to overcome kama and krodha. And then he mentions the moment kama, krodha, these aversion and attachment come, he makes a slight detour to tell you about what are the distractions. Wherever you are doing anything, they'll tell you what are the risks. You to do a project proposal, what do you write towards the end? Okay, what are the risk factors? What are the financial risks? What are the economic risks? Operational risks? Implementation risks? You mentioned, okay, interagency coordination is one risk. So then you will have certain mitigation measures with a high risk, low risk, and this is how we're going to overcome them. That's how you write in your project proposal. Same here, Bhagavan mentions what are the risks? A lot of risks. Why? Because this mind pulls you around, because the indriyas are very powerful. And what do I do? Then he says, he mentions how that things can go wrong. And he mentions, Krodha bhavati sammoha sammoha smriti vibhrama smriti vrangsad buddhinaso buddhinasat pranashyati. The whole cycle is explained. You want to get angry? Go on. Then what do you have? Complete false attachment, sammoha, blindness. And then you forget who you are. What do you forget? Not that you are a boy or a girl or a father or a mother. That, of course, you do. But the worst thing that happens to you, you forget you are the self. You're forgetting that you are part of me. You're forgetting your divinity. You are immediately limiting yourself to one bloody emotion called anger. How miserable are we? Therefore, Bhagavan says, don't do that. Smriti Vrangsat Buddhi Nasho. You forget who you are, then the wisdom is lost, isn't it? So you have a money purse and you don't know where you have kept it. Will you be able to pay in a restaurant? You go and order food? No, because you don't know where is your purse. And that purse is your wisdom that you are the self. So never forget it. Bhagavan is beautifully saying that. Buddhi nasat pranashyati. You are destroyed. You become a pauper because you don't know your account number, your password. You may have billions or millions in bitcoins. You forget the password. I read in the newspaper a few days back, a person wasn't even able to access millions he had in bitcoins because he wasn't being able to remember his password. The password is Atma Jnana, that you are the self. Don't forget that. That password, he says that here. And the person, then again, a beautiful, he always gives a bit of chocolate in the mouth of this student who fights hard to hold himself. He's saying, Ragadvesa Vyukti Vishyandriyaischaran, Vishya Vishyandriyaischaran, Atma Vasyir Vidhyatma. They become Vidhyatma. If you are able to control your mind, then you can work like very nature. Your mind will do what is morally good. You become a Vidhyatma, half the problems in life is over because you don't want to try to be a moral person. By nature, you will become moral. You'll essentially, your mind will always think about good things. Your very presence is going to spread love and compassion and warmth all around. Okay, and then he sort of mentions, he goes further about Sthita Prajna. Then he describes what is the lakshana, what are the indicative features of a guy who's Sthita Prajna, and why does he do that? Because I have mentioned that what is lakshana of a person who is successful is the sadhana or sadhana of a person that is to be emulated by a student. If you meet, there's this interviews with successful candidates in a particular examination. Why the younger students read that? Because they want to emulate it. They want to reach there. That is the purpose as to why we have a long discussion on Sthita Prajnasya Kya Bhasa. This is Arjuna's question to the Lord on behalf of all of us, because we want to reach there. Then he mentions that from Sloka 67 till 69 and then till 72. So he mentions that one key factor is Ya Nisa Sarva Bhutanam Tasyam Jagati Sangami Yasyam Jagati Bhutani Sa Nisa Pasatu Munehe. Where this whole materialistic people find a lot of drive in them to achieve and a lot of things. Why? They find this world very attractive. They want to have money and car and house, healthy body, everything good. The jnani finds darkness in all this because he's seeing something else. And where he finds light, because he sees, you want to meditate, you want to do yoga. The moment you study Vedanta and you turn a little spiritual, you'll become very antisocial amongst your friends. They'll avoid you. Oh, this fellow doesn't want to drink with us. This fellow doesn't want to go to the club with us. If you turn spiritual, you'll become a big antisocial person. You are a burden on your friends. They'll avoid you. And you better avoid them. Because you'll see night where they see day, and you'll see day where they see night. What is the hint? Essentially, they are saying that whatever appears, the reality is exactly different. And when you are truth oriented, your world starts to change. Bhagavan is kind of preparing us to give a longer lecture on the whole path of sadhana in the consecutive, So, and one ultimate state where we have to reach that we allow, not fight with the senses, not fight with the external reality, allow everything to enter, digest it, nothing goes out. Apuryamanam asalam pratistam samudramapah pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarvisa santyam apnoti na kamakami. And beautifully mentions, there's a beautiful sentence by Lao Tzu. He says that when I was young, but slowly when I became middle aged, my mouth became a little soft. Means I spoke beautiful, soft words. And towards the end, my ears became very soft. A lot of things entered that didn't make much of a difference to me. So we have to have soft ears, soft tongue. Of course, we have, but we have sharp tongue. But we need to sort of have a kind of smoothness about us. And so that whatever hits us, it's not like a hard surface that it rebounds, but it comes and loses its speed. Okay, it's like a soft net, so to say, that anything falls on it, it doesn't jump, it sort of stabilizes. This is how chapter 2 ends, and maybe tomorrow we will do a quick summary of another 2 chapters, and depending on whatever. So I'll stop here. If you have any questions, you can ask. Meanwhile, I'm going to put off the YouTube and on the Google Meet. You can ask me questions or whatever.